Folks, it's finally time to talk about the soup. If you have ever seen any of my shorts, any of my what I eat in a day videos, any vlogs even, you will know that soup is forever a staple on my kitchen table. Basically, any season outside of the super hot Italian summer, I am eating soup at least once or twice a week. Today, I am finally sharing with you guys a few of those soup recipes that I love making, I love eating. I used to make them back home in Scotland, I make them here in Italy. I love them. And these three specifically are super budget friendly. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you guys three completely different soup recipes that you can make even if you are a total beginner cook. We're going to be talking about a really simple tomato soup, boosted with a little bit of olive oil and some kind of peppers in there. Secondly, we're going to be talking about a gorgeous spiced carrot, potato and lentil soup, which is somewhere between a soup and a curry, if you will. And we're going to be talking about something a little bit more luxurious, but also super affordable, a creamy potato and rosemary soup with crispy pancetta bits on top. These are all recipes you can make in your own kitchen. These are all recipes you can make to serve yourself, you and your partner, you and your family, and they are all really budget friendly. I hope you guys love these recipes as much as we have. Let's get into it. First soup recipe is going to be that lovely simple tomato pepper soup. Main ingredients being 1 onion, some peppers, whether fresh or kind of in vinegar as I had them, and a good old trusty tin of tomatoes. You can also use fresh ones if they're in season. They were not when I filmed this. You're going to want to start by halving and then dicing your onion just into super small chunks. As with any kind of vegetable you're cooking, the smaller the bits, the faster it cooks, the less time you have to wait before you can eat. I cook these in just a little bit of olive oil because this recipe is totally dairy-free, totally vegan-friendly, lactose-free, yada, yada, yada. Just soften them until they're translucent. They don't need to be kind of browned or anything before adding, I guess, 1 whole fresh pepper or a handful of peppers in vinegar, and then your whole tin of tomatoes. You're then going to want to kind of refill the tin very carefully with some hot water, both to rinse out the tomatoes and to get kind of maximum flavor in there, and of course to dilute everything that's in the pan. And just allow that over a medium heat just to come up to a nice kind of steady bubble as you add all of the rest of the flavors and seasonings. For this, I always like to add usually oregano as the main herb. Sometimes it's nice with thyme. Oregano is usually my favorite though. I personally like to add either a bit of chili or a few dashes of tabasco or any other kind of hot sauce I have handy before adding either a vegetable stock cube or a little kind of spoonful of vegetable stock powder, bouillon powder, whatever you like to call it. Obviously, if you have homemade vegetable stock, chicken stock, anything you like to use, do feel free to use that instead. And then, of course, a bit of salt and some pepper, just enough to kind of season it up to your taste. Typically, I like to let it cook all the way through before tasting it later on, so I don't add too much salt and pepper at this stage, just enough to make sure that it kind of penetrates all of the ingredients in there and isn't just kind of an aftertaste, you know? So at that point, oh, and also a little bit of sugar because tin tomatoes can sometimes be a little bit too tart, a little bit too tangy. And I just leave that to kind of simmer away for at least 20 minutes, anything up to an hour over a low heat before blending until it's beautiful and smooth. Then I spoon it very generously into a bowl, as you can see, lovely and steaming hot, before drizzling over a glug of some decent quality extra virgin olive oil if you have it. Still perfectly delicious without it. You can put some fresh herbs on top, a little bit of cheese on top, some cream, or just leave it absolutely as it is and it will still be wonderfully delicious. This is a really rich, delicious, but cheap tomato soup. Really nutritious, fits at any time of the year. It's an all-season soup. Let's move on to something a little bit more spicy. This is a kind of curry spiced potato, lentil, and carrot soup. These are kind of the main ingredients I'm going to be using. Some carrots, an onion, some spices like garam masala and smoked paprika, as well as some split red lentils. I start just as with the other soup by kind of peeling and halving the onion before dicing it into little tiny chunks or as little as I can be bothered to chop before cooking them in some olive oil just as before, because this is also another vegan friendly recipe, before peeling my carrots and chopping them just into little small pieces. The carrots are the vegetable that will take the longest to cook in this recipe, so the finer you chop them, the kind of more even the cooking will be and the quicker you'll be able to eat your dinner, because I'm always thinking like a hungry person. I also peel the potatoes for this recipe before cutting them into pieces just a tiny bit bigger than the carrots, and throwing them in there along with the spices just to gently toast once the onions are translucent, before adding then some stock, the lentils, and then just enough water to cover all of those vegetables. And much like the tomato soup, you're just going to want to let that come up to a bubble before turning it down to a steady simmer and letting it cook for about 15 to 20 minutes until everything is tender. You can blitz it or keep it chunky here, serve it with some fresh parsley, and if you like, with some homemade flatbreads or some crackers, whatever you like. Now let's move on to something a bit more hearty and wholesome. This creamy potato soup with crispy pancetta. This is probably the most kind of simple of all of the soups. We begin again by chopping up an onion into little tiny pieces, but this time we're going to cook them in some butter over a slightly lower heat, just for an extra bit of flavor and for creaminess. Again, just until they are kind of translucent after about 5 or 10 minutes. Definitely no kind of browning or toasting or frying here needed. Then you're just going to grab some potatoes. Any kind will work. I use these new potatoes because it's coming into the season, but even a floury or, a bigger potato will work perfectly fine. Personally, I also like to keep the skin on because I like the flavor it adds. I like having minimal waste, and I don't mind seeing a few flecks of extra color in the soup. But of course, if you want it to be a bit more chefy and smooth, or you just don't really want the kind of taste or texture of those skins in there, do feel free to peel them first. So I wash the potatoes and chop them into pretty small, even chunks for a nice kind of steady and even cook, and as always, for it to be as quick as possible. By cooking them all evenly, it means you'll get no kind of chunks of raw potato in there either. To that, I then add some dried rosemary. If you have fresh, even better. And then again, just add enough water to cover the onion and potato, allowing it to come to a bubble, then simmering for 15 to 20 minutes. In the meantime, I'll grab some pancetta. This was just pancetta from Lidl. And while the potato soup was bubbling away, I just cooked it until it was nice and crisp and just a little bit golden brown in a small frying pan, reserving the fat. And because I hate waste and I love flavor, adding it straight into the soup pan to be blended in, keeping that pancetta aside ready for serving. At this point, you can add your milk or your cream before blending it into a perfectly smooth consistency. You can make it as thick or as kind of thin as you like. I don't like my soups to be too kind of thick, so I add a fair amount of milk before then serving with those little pancetta pieces on top. I also like to add black pepper, fresh parsley, and even a little grating of cheese would go really well over this. This is like a hug in a bowl. Really, really delicious, comforting, and so good for you. This is an especially good one in those kind of colder spring days or winter months. Love it. Absolutely love it. And to me, it tastes like a little bit of home. That is going to be it for today's recipe video, guys. Don't forget, if you guys enjoyed, you can always subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can support on Patreon. The link is always in the description box below. And if you guys would like to see more savory recipes or just more soup recipes, let me know and I'll be happy to do that for you. Thanks so much for watching as always, and I'll see you for the next one.